one of the subjects that we studied last year it's called Sana Mushtarika, yani it's like a combination of subjects you do in the first year, is al-fiqh. We studied a book called Umdatul Fiqh, which is the Hanbali madhab. Not an issue. It's that's the syllabus, and it's completely fine. But in the first semester, so there's 3 semesters last year. We've gone back to 2, but there was 3 semesters last year. The first semester we did the first half of the book, which is about Arkanul Islam, al-Tahara, al-Salah, al-Zakah, al-Siyam, al-Hajj. But the second half, and this is what I'm to speak about, the second half we did in the 3rd semester. This is about mu'amalat. So that was ibadat. This was mu'amalat, which is dealings, interactions with people around you. So we did a few bits. So we did, for example, money, items related to money, and then the bulk of our subject, or the bulk of our study, was around marriage and divorce. Marriage and divorce. And my teacher, he made some beautiful points, and he was a really good teacher, mashallah, Allahumma barik. He used to constantly remind us, for example, like in Kitabun Nikah or Kitabut Talaq, for example, there's certain bits, there's certain sentences. For example, one sentence that comes to mind, just one sentence, like 5-6 words. It says, for example, if you tell the woman that if you tell your wife that if you leave the house, you're divorced. Now that is the Islamic ruling. But and there's many items like this, and the problem that we have is a lot of so-called religious students of knowledge, or whatever you want to call it. They use Islam, they use these sort of rulings for their advantage, to overpower certain people, or to be a tyrant in the marriage. They basically they use Islam to control others. And okay, certain things are in the book, but what my point here is, my teacher, he kept on mentioning, and he used to always mention, and he warned us as well. He's like, above all these rulings, this sentence, that sentence, and the man has this right, and the woman can do this, and the rest of it. Above all of these rulings is taqwa, at-taqwa. You have to have fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have people out there, they're using Islam to do injustice on others. They're using the religion to do injustice on others, or gang up on someone. So for example, let's just say husband and wife have a marital issue, which is completely normal, by the way. The guy, he's like a student of knowledge, for example, and his friend is a scholar. So they'll bring his friend in to mediate between the husband and wife, but then that friend will obviously have that bias towards the guy. So then he will use Islam, and he'll use these texts and the rest of it to go against the woman and to side with his friend. That's something that I've heard of. That's what I'm sort of relaying the story to. That's something I've personally heard of, which is ridiculous. Wallahi, there's no taqwa there. To be straight, and then obviously, like, this teacher, his name was Sheikh Al-Suhaimi, but he was saying that another teacher in Masjid al-Nabawi, a lot of these issues come back to him, and then he talks about them as well openly. Like, for example, people going back to their country, and then using these rules to then behave how they want. No taqwa again. So it's very important. One thing I must say, that I'm in Kulliyatul Quran, so my teacher made very clear that stick to your lane. You don't have to be a hero and start going out there and trying to give rulings. The scholars of the past, when it came to marriage and divorce, he mentioned like 10 scholars consecutively, just mentioned 10 names, and it's like, these they ran away. If there was any issue, if someone came with an issue relating to marriage or divorce, they would run away. They said, we're not answering this question, because they had this sort of, they knew how delicate this situation is. And then you get students here they learn a bit of ilm, and then they go and then they put themselves out there and they say, I'm going to answer all these questions, and I'm going to, like, they want the hot seat, but they don't belong there. Do you know what I'm saying? So I just thought I'll give this little reminder in terms of don't don't use Islam as in like, don't use Islam as something to then use against others. That's ridiculous. Okay, and number two is, yes, there are Islamic rulings, but above all, there's taqwa. So, this can then lead on to other aspects. So, for example, I don't want to get too into it and too controversial, but for example, if a scholar says, in relation to mortgage, for example, is it haram, is it halal, and the rest of it. But anyways, what I'm trying to say is, you have rulings, but then you have taqwa as well, and taqwa overrides the rulings.